Okay, Charlie, you ready to go?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The first item of business on the agenda this evening is to confirm the appointment of Councillor Philip Stern as chairman of this committee for 2021. Please can you let me know if members, are you all in favour? If you could unmute your microphones and let us know.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
And just in case, is anyone not in favour for the record? Take that silence as a no. Okay, then sorry, there's an echo in the background. Has someone got another device on at the same time in the same room? If so, please could you mute it? Thank you. In that case, we confirm that the appointment of Councillor Philip Stern as chairman for 2021 for this committee is made. Chairman, over to you for item 2.
Phil, you're on.
Sorry, who's doing what now?
Councillor Stern, if you could take item 2.
Jim.
Yeah, okay. Therefore, now the vice chairman and Councillor Jill Mercer is put forward. Are you all happy that Jill carries on for another year?
Aye.
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 Agree.
So that's carried.
Okay. Before we get into the apologies of the meeting, it was agreed to do a roll call just to make everyone aware of everyone's presence. So if I can call out members' names and they can indicate their presence responding to me, please. Councillor Dudley Hughes.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Bert Jackson.
It's muted.
He's got his microphone.
I can see you, Councillor Jackson. Can you unmute?
He can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Councillor Barbara Jenny.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Lance Jones.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Mercer.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Mercer.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Harriet Pentland.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Shacklock.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Philip Stern.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Robin Underwood.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Wathen.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Lee Wilkes.
Yes, here.
Thank you for that.
So shall I take over now, Charlie?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we've done the first 2 items on the agenda. Before we get to the apologies on item 3, can I just read out a statement of what we're up to tonight in case anyone doesn't understand, particularly from the residents. So I'm Philip Stern, Chairman of the Planning Management Committee, and I'd like to welcome councillors, officers, members, and the public to East Northamptonshire Council's first virtual planning meeting. Tonight, I have a number of speakers, and I would remind everyone participating that this meeting is being broadcast live and will be provided on the Council's YouTube channel following the meeting. I'd now like to introduce the members, but I think Charlie's just done that. So let's carry on to item 3 on the agenda, which is apologies, please, Charlie.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies were just noted from Councillor Roger Clitheroe.
Chairman, did we not need to do a roll call of the officers as well?
Would someone like to do that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so.
If you would, please, Charlie.
The ones I believe we have, if you could indicate your presence, are Patrick Reed.
Present.
Thank you. Carolyn Tate.
Present.
Dean Wishart.
Present.
Lloyd Mills.
Present.
Ros Johnson.
Present.
Vanessa Blaine, solicitor.
Present.
Thank you. Paul Bland.
I'm present.
Thank you. And Pete Paish.
Yeah, present.
Thank you. If I've missed anyone, please indicate now. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. So, we've done the apologies, so we go on to item number 4, the minutes of the last meeting. We can't, or we could spend a long time voting on it, but I don't think we need to. Have you read the minutes? Do you understand them? Are you in agreement with them?
Chairman, Councillor Jenny would like to speak on this.
Say again, Jill.
Councillor Jenny would like to speak about the minutes.
Councillor Jenny.
I'd like to raise a point as a matter of accuracy. The minutes on page 514, it refers in the third line on the application relating to land to the west of Rushden Lakes.
Yeah.
In the third line, it refers to the garden square. In the 12th line, the minutes refer to the green square. That should, of course, be the garden square. That's the only correction.
I'm sure we could change that, can't we, Charlie?
Yes, of course we can.
Thank you. Fine.
Thank you.
Any other points? So, can I take it the minutes are accepted? Can I have a yay?
Aye.
Aye.
Agreed.
That's covered that. So item number 5 are declarations of interest and informal site visits. The first is declarations of interest. Any members have any?
Yes, I do.
Go on, Jeff.
Okay, Bennyfield Road, Glapthorne. The applicant is a family friend, so I won't take part in this application.
Okay.
And both applications for land adjacent to Brook Farm Cottage, Rawns, the agents are known to me, but that's just another interest.
Okay, fine. Any others? Okay, any site visits informal?
Yes, I've been to Twywell. That's Dudley.
Fine.
Councillor Hughes.
It's Peter Wathen here. I did an informal site visit on Brooks Road. Didn't sort of speak to anybody or enter the site.
It's okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
And I did the one at Twywell and both of the Oundle applications.
Yes, okay, thanks, Jeff. Right, let's move on to item number 6 on the other side. Questions from members, please.
Yes, Chair, there were no questions received.
Thank you. And section 106 agreements and delegations. Ros, is that yours? Jill?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Turning to Appendix 1, section 106 agreements first. Members will note that officers are requesting extensions of time for the conclusion of the legal agreements on 2 items, Earthling Borough West and land south east of Ferris School. The extensions being requested are until the end of August 2020. The reported Appendix 2 provides members with an update on items which the committee has previously delegated. I shall now hand back to you, Chairman, for any questions.
Okay. Members, any questions on what is quite a large list? No? None?
Chairman, Andy would like to ask a question.
The Earthenborough West one is now getting on for 10 years old. Is there not some point at which you call it a day and say we kill this one?
Ros?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are potentially options to do that, Councillor. What officers are currently doing is sort of working through the various options with the County Council and the applicant, and it's intended to bring a report to this committee in due course, giving you the various options.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions?
Can I comment, please? Councillor Jenny, I'd like to thank officers, particularly Dean Wishart, for the contribution he made to getting 106 agreement in respect of the Rushden Living application. He did a lot of work on that, and I'm very grateful for his input.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Right, so can I have an aye for your agreement to the report?
Aye.
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 Quick question, does that include agreeing the extension?
Chairman, did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear it. Who's it? And
Did that include the extensions?
Have we agreed the extensions?
go back
Surely
again.
we've agreed the report, which contains the extensions.
Yeah, but we are sometimes asked to vote for particular extensions.
So
How many
normally,
extensions are there, Ros?
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, for the avoidance of doubt, it would be sensible if we just confirmed that we were approving the extensions.
Yes, so we're including the extensions in our agreement with the report. Okay.
Agreed.
Aye.
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 Aye. Right, so on to the applications for the night. And on page 3 of the report, we have the first one in Bennefield Road, Blackthorn. And the officer involved is Peter Besch, who's going to take us through it. Peter? Peter, you're on.
Yep, I'm here. Good evening, Chair. Let me just load up the presentation.
Peter, are you ready?
Yep, just getting that.
Give your report then. Oh, you're still playing, are you?
I'm just loading it up, sorry. Right, can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, excuse me, it's Robin. How do we get a better picture, a bigger picture last time?
You have to go to full screen. That's the,
How do I do that?
Let's have this argument again. We had this yesterday.
So you have to go to full screen. Maybe it's because you haven't got it on full screen.
First one.
Peter, can you show us the next page, which is the map of the site, which we were difficult with?
One guy chipped in and said,
That's
full screen.
So, Robin, that's our map. That's all we've got.
Okay.
Is that okay? Shall I get on?
Yeah, ready to go.
Ready to go?
Peter, do you want to come and listen to the question?
Fine.
I'm just going to sit beside Dad. Can you sit beside Dad and then listen to the
I
question?
think someone's got a microphone on.
Yes, because you can hear the guy talking.
It's me.
Okay. Right, shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yep,
Yeah.
fine.
No interruptions.
No, that's fine. Okay, so this application, which is in front of you now, is for the. Hold on a second. I'll go through late representations first. Actually, we had 2 late representations received on this one today from the ward member and the chairman of Blackthorn Parish Council. I believe the chairman is with us tonight to speak on it. However, in summary, they both offered their support to the proposal. They also considered the proposal would not be harmful to the area and accord with the adopted planning policies.
We'll talk about Blackstone.
So is that your report, Peter?
That's coming up now. So right, the plan application is for the change of use from agriculture to equestrian.
Okay, so going to the first one.
Including the erection of a stable block and hay barn, creation of an all-weather outdoor arena, and the erection of a 4-bedroom temporary equestrian workers' dwelling, alongside access parking
At the same time.
and landscaping and a field.
And at the moment,
Sorry, can I hear somebody speaking?
To do with the application.
Somebody who's
speaking in the background.
talking as I'm trying, yeah. Almost talking through the slides. I'm not sure who it is, but
No, I'm not
I think
either.
it's maybe
So
someone that's dialing in on the phone.
let Pete do his job.
Yep. So as you can see from the slide in front of you, the site with my cursor is located just here, outlined in red. It's approximately 400 metres to the west of the village of Glapthorne, which I'm circling with my cursor now. Hold on a second. The recommendation for this application is one of refusal. The reason should be in front of you, but for the benefit of those people dialing in, the first reason for refusal is that the proposal, including the temporary workers dwelling, is considered to represent an unsustainable form of development in a location detached from the established settlement of Glapthorne, with the applicant failing to sequentially assess more suitable available sites, and no evidence to suggest that the proposal would meet the special criteria contained within policies 11, 13, 25 of the North Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy. The second reason is that the proposal, by virtue of its location in the open countryside, would create a prominent development that would have a detrimental impact on the pleasant, unspoiled and tranquil landscape setting that would erode the character and appearance of the area, not only in its physical sense of the buildings on site, but also the commercial activity that would be focused in this area of open countryside. The development is therefore in conflict with the NPPF and policies 3, 8 of the Joint Core Strategy and policies 4 and 5 of the Glapthorne Neighbourhood Plan. Okay, I'll go back to the aerial. As you can see from the aerial photo in front of you, the site, which is located just here, is located deep into the open countryside and significantly detached from the village of Glapthorne. There's no significant development within the vicinity other than the occasional farmstead. In terms of the principle of development, as I stated, we're looking at 400 metres away from the settlement boundary. This settlement boundary is defined by policy 2 of the Glapthorne Neighbourhood Plan. Policies 11 and 25 of the Joint Core Strategy state that sustainable opportunities to develop and diversify the rural economy that are of an appropriate scale for their location and respect the environmental quality and character of the rural area will be supported. Policy 4 of the Glapthorne Neighbourhood Plan also goes on to state that in supporting rural diversification, proposals for employment development, including the reuse of rural buildings, should relate well to the built form of the parish and be appropriate to the parish in terms of its scale, location, design and materials. It's considered that the proposal does not meet the adopted neighbourhood plan policy as the site does not relate well to the existing settlement, being within the open countryside with no connectivity to the village, no footpaths, and it would involve the construction of a complete new facility in a particularly sensitive landscape area that has remained unspoiled and open forever. As the application also proposes a 4-bedroom temporary dwelling for initial 3 years as part of the facility, the guidance contained within policy 13 of the Joint Core Strategy is important. In the open countryside, away from established settlements, permission will not be granted for new residential development unless an exception test can be met. In this instance, a temporary equestrian workers dwelling is proposed on the site in order to care for the stabled horses. The mobile home is shown to have 4 bedrooms, which from the outset appears excessive and not essential for the purposes of a temporary equestrian workers dwelling. The applicant has submitted a justification statement for an essential workers dwelling. However, the statement appears to list possible emergency scenarios, such as horses being subject to butchery, dogs chasing horses, thunder startling horses, and horses generally getting stuck or ill. It's considered that there would be no need for an essential worker on site, as the possible scenarios put forward within the justification statement could be mitigated against through security measures and good practice. Furthermore, Glapthorne is located close by, as is Oundle, with obviously places to buy and rent in those areas. The current Glapthorne Manor Stables and Riding School is established and operational from a site within the village. The owner of the existing Glapthorne Manor Stables has obtained planning permission for the conversion of the existing barn and stable complex to residential dwellings. This was done in 2018. The approval of residential dwellings upon the existing riding school is not considered justification for the construction of a new facility within the open countryside. The site is not considered to be suitable for the proposed development, and no sequential evidence has been submitted to demonstrate the lack of suitability on sites that could be considered more appropriate than this application site. For example, sites adjoining the established settlement or sites that have existing buildings that could be converted for the use. The Roydon School currently operates from a site within the settlement and appears to be successful, with many letters of support stating what a valued facility it is for the village. The council is certainly not preventing it from continuing to operate successfully from its existing site, as it has done for approximately 30 years. The applicant happens to own the application site that's located deep into the countryside. The threat of closure of the existing business is not considered to result in the principle of development being established, as the applicant is not being forced to close down the existing business, and other more suitable sites may be available for the proposed development. On this basis, no evidence has been submitted to suggest the proposal would meet the special criteria contained within policies 11, 13 or 25 of the core strategy, or policy 4 of the Glapthorne Neighbourhood Plan. Right, here's a couple of slides showing the plans. So this is the proposed site plan. The area I'm highlighting on here is the parking. We have a hay barn located in this area, the stables at the top, the outdoor area here, and the 4-bedroom mobile home just here. Here's the elevation of the stables, obviously low level. And here's the floor plans, just showing obviously the standard stable complex layout. Here's the hay barn. This is the mobile home elevation, and these are the mobile home floor plans, obviously showing the layouts with the 4 bedrooms, the living area, bathroom, etc. So in terms of the impact of development on the character and appearance of the area, here's a few photos of the area and site. These 3 photos you can see on your screen at the moment are photographs leading out of the village up to where the site is. As you can see, there's no development anywhere, there's no footpaths, no street lights. It's very rural, open countryside. These 4 photos here show the site. Again, as you can see, it's just an open site with undulating countryside with views into the distance there. Policy 3 of the North Northamptonshire Joint Force Strategy requires development to be designed in a way that is sensitive to its landscape setting and would enhance the distinctive qualities of the landscape character which it would affect. But more importantly, Policy 5 of the Glapthorne Neighbourhood Plan states that new development must demonstrate its siting and design will protect and enhance features which contribute towards the special landscape character and the pattern of open spaces surrounding the village. Obviously, this area here is part of the larger open space which surrounds the village and gives it its unique character. As you can see in the photographs, the open undulating fields to the west of Glapthorne significantly contribute to this special landscape. The development of a commercial equestrian centre would erode the openness and character of this area, not only in the physical appearance of the buildings on site, but also the commercial activity which will be focused on this site in the open countryside. It's therefore considered that the proposal would be at odds with Policy 3 of the core strategy and Policy 5 of the adopted Glapthorne Neighbourhood Plan, as it would have a significant detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the open countryside and unspoilt landscape that surrounds the established settlement. By virtue of the proposal being significantly detached from the village, it creates an alien feature within the countryside, and whilst measures have been proposed in an attempt to lessen the impact of the proposal through building placement upon the site and landscaping, it's ultimately considered that the proposal would have a detrimental impact upon this area of the countryside, with no real justification other than the site happening to be owned by the applicant. As you can see from the officer report, the other considerations, material planning considerations, which include residential amenity, highway safety and parking, flood risk, ecology and archaeology, could all be considered acceptable with relevant mitigation secured via conditions. Therefore, in conclusion, having assessed the proposal, it's considered that insufficient justification has been provided for the equestrian facility and temporary workers' dwelling to be located within an isolated field in the open countryside. The applicant has failed to demonstrate that there are no other sequentially suitable sites. There appears to be no substantive need for the equestrian facility to relocate into the open countryside, other than the fact that the site owner has obtained planning permission to convert their existing premises into residential units. This is not considered sufficient justification and would result in a development that would have a significant impact upon the openness of the unspoilt landscape to the west of the village. For the reasons in front of you on the slide and in the section 8 of the officer report, the recommendation is therefore one of refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Very comprehensive. We now move to the speakers. The first...
Chair, if I may, Paul Bland speaking.
Yep.
Could I just intervene for one moment, please? Paul Bland, Head of Planning Services speaking. It is the first time that we've done a virtual planning committee, so we're all learning along the way. But there is some interference coming through that is distracting the members and the rest of the audience from the presentation. We believe it's coming from at least one of the registered speakers and probably one of those on a landline. We appreciate you can't mute your phone, but if you could perhaps hold your hand over the mouthpiece, that would prevent us from hearing you talking in the background. It is rather distracting, so I hope that you don't mind doing that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul. So, let's move on then to the speakers. The first one is Malcolm Moss, Councillor, who is with Glaxthorne Parish Council. And
yes, good evening. I'm here.
Right.
I'll have to be very brief because I've got a parish council meeting starting in a few minutes. I've made a written submission, which I think members will have in front of them, but there's a blatant inaccuracy in the report that we've just heard, and that is that the applicant does not own the stables or the barns where her current business is operated from. These facilities are owned by others, and they are being turned into dwellings. The planning permission has been granted, and so if the applicant cannot relocate the equestrian business, then it will close. It's as simple as that. So the connection between the applicant owning the facility at the moment and then wishing to move, having got planning permission to change to dwellings, is not accurate. I would advise members to look carefully at the written submission, and we do take issue about the neighbourhood plan policies 5 particularly that won't affect the landscape character, and it's supported by our policies on supporting local businesses and protecting and existing and supporting new community and recreational services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Would the officer like to come back on that point or not for the moment?
No, I suppose not at the moment. I did say...
Give it till afterwards then.
Yes.
The second speaker, which is Kerry Fluger, is it?
It's Flegger, yes, Kerry Flegger, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. And you are, you are the agent for the application?
Yes, I'm the agent, thank you. So yes, I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, Katie Wilkinson, tonight, who's operated Glaxthorne Manor Riding School for 33 years. Mrs Wilkinson is a tenant of the existing stable yard and associated house, as just clarified, and is required to vacate following the grant of planning permission for residential redevelopment. It is proposed to relocate the riding school approximately 400 kilometres to the west of Glaxthorne so that it remains within the catchment of our customer base, 90% of whom live within 5 miles The necessity for paddock and grazing land means a countryside or edge of village location is essential. The application proposals are being carefully designed in consultation with a landscape consultant to ensure the proposed stables and hay barn are located on the lowest part of the site. The buildings would be located 7.5 metres lower than Benfield Road, with a maximum ridge height of 3.9 metres. Together with existing and proposed landscaping, the stables and hay barn would be barely visible in view along Benfield Road and would certainly not be prominent as suggested in the committee report. The council's own tree and landscape officer has confirmed the proposals are acceptable and are likely to enhance biodiversity. The proposed development would enable a successful and valued local community facility to continue operating as well as enhance its facilities. If planning permission is granted, the applicant proposes to expand the services she offers, including operating as a riding for the disabled centre and providing equine assisted therapy. The council's economic development officer fully supports the proposals, stating they will help to retain and grow employment in the area, which is key for the local rural economy and will not have a detrimental impact on the rural character of the area. The applicant regularly provides placements for trainees, and she has 2 trainees waiting to join her if the business relocates. A mobile home is required for security and welfare of the horses. However, if members have concerns regarding the size, amended plans could be submitted for a smaller unit. In summary, the application proposals would allow the continuation of an existing successful local business as the country and local communities look to move forward after the current pandemic has never been so important to support local businesses and facilities such as Glackthorne Manor Riding School, which provides a valuable facility for physical and mental well-being. The past 2 months have only served to demonstrate what a valued facility the riding school is, with the applicant receiving so many queries about when she will open again.
Sorry to interrupt. Have you got much more to say, because your 3 minutes are up?
I've got 2 short paragraphs. Sorry, I thought I still had 30 seconds left. Can I finish?
No, I can't add any more time because we'd have to do that for everyone. So if you just finish up with a sentence, please.
Okay. Whilst officers have come to the view that the proposals would have a detrimental impact upon the landscape setting, this is not an opinion supported by the council's own tree and landscape officer, economic development officer or the parish council, all of whom support the proposals. Likewise, there are no objections from the council's highway, drainage or archaeological officers. There can therefore be no technical reasons for refusal.
Thank you. That's enough. You're going on again.
Right, thank you very much.
You'll have to spend some more time in the mirror in the future, won't you? So those are the speakers on this particular topic tonight. And we now move to the ward member, but unfortunately we don't have a ward member available to us tonight. And I've asked at the late notice Dudley to propose to the members what he thinks about the application.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, it is quite obvious that the report is inaccurate. In 714, it says that the applicant has obtained permission. Well, they haven't obtained permission because the other premises they don't own. So that changes the whole face of this thing. It's not a question of they could stay where they are. They can't stay where they are. Have a up and coming business which they want to expand, and also I'm very impressed by the number of stables on the plan, which they want to carry on with, and the only way they can carry on with is to have a new site. If you look at the map that was carefully supplied to councillors, you will note that looking at the ridge lines, I remember doing this when I was in the Scouts, looking at the ridge lines, the map actually shows that the woodland on the other side of the road is higher than the this projected development, so therefore it goes down a dip. It won't actually stick up a lot on the surrounding countryside, and I see they've been using wood to face the buildings and so on. So therefore, I would have thought they were in keeping with the surrounding countryside. On the one hand, the complaint is too far from Clapthorne. On the other hand, well, they could have the person who's running it could, or looking after it, only could go and live in Clapthorne because it's only 400 metres. So it seems to me that, and obviously I look forward to hearing what other people have to say, that the premise for refusal is not correct, in that they can't, it's either do or die as far as this business is concerned. We want to encourage businesses in the countryside. This is not just something fly in the sky. This is an established business that is obviously much valued by the people who use it, and it will be a shame if the alternative to us granting this permission tonight, the business had to close. But I look forward to hearing what other councillors have to say.
Thank you, Dudley. That's great. Jill, have we any speakers?
Yes, Councillor Andy Mercer would like to speak first, please.
Andy?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very concerned about this application because it's going to be effectively a landmark one for them. Don't you want to turn the video on?
Video's on.
Oh, okay. We are in a different situation to where we were 2 months ago even, and we are in a situation of probably the deepest recession this country has known since at least the 1930s and possibly back earlier than that. Under those circumstances, we've got to do everything we possibly can to support local businesses. Now, this is a local business that exists. Hopefully it will survive the disaster that our economy is in the process of suffering, and we should therefore be doing everything possible to keep it alive. Now, given that the applicant for this site does not own their own existing premises and that someone else does own them and has made it abundantly clear that they intend to redevelop that site, then the only way we can keep this business going for sure is to grant it planning consent to move to this new location. Under the circumstances, we have to look at the issue of planning balance. No application is ever 100% positive or 100% negative. It's a question of balance. Now, the balance is changed dramatically by what's happened in this country in the last 2 months. Right now, almost our highest priority is preserving the economy. That is why the government has spent £1/3 of £1 trillion in furloughing workers and giving grants to small businesses. Under the circumstances, I think we should seriously consider granting this application, perhaps with conditions, but certainly we can't condemn this business that is currently viable to death.
Jill,
And are there any other speakers?
Robin?
Yeah, first of all, Peter Wathen. I'll put you on the list, Robin.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, can I echo my agreement with Dudley and with Andy on that one? It just seems ridiculous to refuse this. Most riding schools are somewhat out in the countryside anyway, so this is no different. And it's only 400 metres, not 400 kilometres, as the agent accidentally said, but never mind. And the people on the ground, the local council, are fully in support of this, and the information about the inaccuracy in the report, the fact that the applicant doesn't own the other site where they are at the moment, I think this is one we have probably got to say yes to. Thank you, Chairman.
Peter?
Hi, Phil. Chairman, can I come back in on some points soon, or do I have to wait?
Spoken before you come back. You want to wait for everything?
Yeah, I just want to correct it about the inaccuracies of site ownership, that's all. But if you want me to wait until the end, I can wait and come back in.
Well, I think it's probably better for you, because then we get a full picture of what the members say. So, Jill, do we have any more members wish to speak?
Yes, Barbara's next. Barbara Jenny.
Barbara?
Yes, I think some of the concerns I had with regard to this application was whether this was an expansion of the business, whether the site they were currently on, the new site, would allow them to expand the business, and I think that question has been answered. The other concern was in relation to the size of the mobile unit. A 4-bedroom unit does seem excessive, unless of course with the increase of the business, it was going to be used for office and other purposes. I would tend to support the application, mainly based on the fact that the local parish council is in support of it. And as has already been commented, we do need to support rural businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. That's great. Jill, any more?
Yes, we have, Chairman. We're also getting a bit of background, as I'm not sure where that's from. Perhaps the officers can advise. Harriet Pentland is next.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Can I step in on the ownership part, please? Because it seems to be going in that kind of direction about the ownership and how there's inaccuracy in the report, and there isn't, essentially. So can I come in on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so in 2018, the application 18/00895 was made by the Wilkinson Family Partnership. I don't know if members know exactly that the applicant isn't involved in that partnership. Are you so certain that that isn't the case? Because it seems to be hinging the argument based on she doesn't own the site. And either way, members should also know that site ownership is not a planning consideration. We're only looking at this field, and this field's only been chosen because the applicant happens to own this field. It hasn't been sequentially assessed and chosen. We're talking about a site which is just in the countryside and has been picked because obviously the applicant owns it. But the main point I needed to get across really was the ownership of the actual existing stables. When the application came in, it was from the Wilkinson Family Partnership. The applicant for this one is Wilkinson. I'm not sure where the inaccuracies are from the council's point of view, from my point of view, in putting that across to you. That's all for now, so I'll let the debate carry on.
We'll carry on. So, young lady, your turn.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to echo supporting local small businesses.
Sorry, Councillor Pentland, I can't hear you. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing the same.
No, I can't hear either.
I can only hear you a little bit. Thank you.
How's this? Is that a bit better?
That's a bit louder.
Okay, I will try my best to keep my voice up. I wanted to echo the points that fellow councillors made regarding supporting local small businesses. The concern I had was the same as Councillor Jenny's regarding the size of the... Are you still struggling to hear me?
I can make you out. It's not clear, but I can make out what you're saying. I don't know if anyone else is the same.
I think perhaps it's best if someone else speaks first. I will type my comments into the chat and then perhaps another member could read them for me.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Harriet's going to type her comments into the chat. In the meantime, Councillor Underwood would like to speak.
Sure, okay.
Thank you. First of all, I agree that as Councillor Mercer said, we ought to support businesses at this present time. But I'd like to ask the officer, have we ever agreed on other applications to permit when the policies, as it is in this case, the application does not agree with the policies?
Well, I can come back on that point if you like. As in my presentation, I went through the policies and I said there's basically, if you are going to develop in the countryside, you need to assess that there aren't any more suitable sites available to develop on. This site is only being put forward because the applicant happens to own this site. If a site was adjacent to the settlement, that site would be more sequentially preferable. If a site had buildings on, for example, that could be converted to a facility, that would be more acceptable. That hasn't happened in this instance. The application has just come forward based on the fact that there's a threat of closure from the site that was gained planning permission from the Wilkinson Family Partnership. Then a Wilkinson has also submitted a plan application to move the site to this location in the countryside. That's essentially what's happened. So yeah, in response to your question, there are exceptions to allow development in the countryside, but it has to meet those exceptions. One of those will be to sequentially assess other sites to make sure that there aren't any other suitable sites available. That exercise hasn't been done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That's very clear. Any other speakers, Jill?
We have, first of all, Lance Jones. I don't know if he wants to speak, but he said he was concerned.
Lance?
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. I am concerned about the connected persons issue here with respect to Wilkinson's and if we need to make sure there isn't a fiduciary connection here, I think that we need to be sure there isn't, because I absolutely believe in the concerns that have been raised about supporting economic development at these times. But if actually all we're doing is facilitating something else, then I don't think that is a good argument. So I think we do need to establish the financial connection between the applicant and what's gone on here at the development of the site in Blackthorn. Otherwise, the economic argument does not hold.
Okay, thank you, Lance.
Chairman, Ros wanted to come in.
Yeah, Ros.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate some of the points that Pete has made. First of all, with regard to the ownership issue, just to reiterate, so I'm looking at the previous application and I just would like to confirm. So the applicant details on the previous permission for the conversions is stated as Wilkinson Manor House Wilkinson Farming Partnership. So that is the information that we have before us. In my mind, that isn't critical to the determination because, as has been pointed out, ownership is not a material planning consideration. And the critical point here is that there hasn't been a sequential assessment to select the chosen site. It is a coincidence that the applicant owns that site. However, I do take on board that members feel that they need to be clear on that. So one option open to you would be to defer, to ask officers to seek further information to clarify that matter. So that's the first point. The second matter I wanted to raise is because officers feel strongly that the principle of the development is not supported, we haven't conducted an assessment by an agricultural consultant to give advice as to the necessity and whether the size is appropriate for the temporary agricultural dwelling. So if members, you were considering approval, I would suggest that you defer and ask officers to conduct that assessment, because there would be a danger if you granted the permission that we would not have conducted that full assessment, and that could set a precedent for other applications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ros. I understand that. Dudley, you've got that in mind.
Sorry, do you want me to read out Harriet's comments? She said, I agree with fellow councillors regarding supporting a local business. However, I'm concerned about the size of the mobile home, which seems excessively large for a dwelling that is intended to be used in emergencies. I'm just going to scroll down to see who else. After Ben just made a bit of a comment. I think Andy wanted to come in next, and then Barbara wants to come back.
Only one more time. Andy.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm coming back because we haven't yet officially started the debate until there's been a motion proposed. At that point, only councillors can speak, and they can only speak once. The points I wanted to make were partially to reinforce what Ros has said, namely that ownership is not a material consideration, and we should not even be discussing it because it is not relevant. All that matters is whether or not the applicant is going to be forced to leave the site and is going to need another site. That is all that matters on that issue. Right, the next point is that this mobile home is a temporary allocation. It is a mobile home. It is not a 4-bedroom detached house in open countryside. So the issue that we normally have about trying to prevent inappropriate development in the countryside does not apply to it, because it is a temporary accommodation. Now, stables, as far as I'm concerned, are a rural economy issue. It is a rural business activity which we have a policy requiring us to support. I'm surprised none of the officers raised this, to tell the truth. Now, given that we have to look at planning balance, what are we potentially losing here? We're potentially losing part of a view, but as has been pointed out by Councillor Dudley Hughes, given the topography, that's not a major issue, but we're also potentially setting a principle. Now, in the past, we have several times turned down equestrian applications for various reasons. I personally disagreed with those, but I think the officers are right. This is a matter of principle. We should be setting a principle that an equestrian stables with a trotting area, etc., is a rural application. It's not a town centre application. Why are we looking at it as one? Because the sequential test applies to town centre activities. That's what it's normally applied to, not to rural activities. So I think that we are looking at this in the wrong way.
Thank you, Andy.
As I said, Barbara wished to come back.
Barbara?
Well, I was going to take up the point made by the planning officer that we have an agricultural assessment and we defer for that reason. If we are deferring, then I would suggest that we also ask for a sequential test to be done, as things seem to be hinging on whether any sequential test has been carried out. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Good logical reason. Anyone else?
Ros said that she wished to clarify something.
Ros?
Thank you. Yes, just to pick up on what Barbara has said, yes, I fully agree that it is relevant when we're talking about a temporary dwelling as to whether it is needed and whether the size is appropriate. So just to reinforce, it is an essential consideration on this application.
Thank you, Ros. So, Dudley, I think it's back to you. I guess you've heard most of that.
Heard all of it, yes.
And I guess we've got options here. I don't know what you feel, but I need a proposal, please.
Yes, I'm going to make a proposal. Just one moment. I feel the agricultural assessment is unnecessary because we've got a successful business that can afford to increase its size like this. If it was not a failing business, or if indeed if it was a new business, usually we go for an agricultural assessment when either it's a new business or a very dodgy business, and this is obviously not one. Secondly, as you rightly say, and Andy rightly says, the ownership issue is only mildly affected. The question is, this lady, if it's a lady, wants to move her business and have a good business in a site that's really not very imposing on the countryside, because as Councillor Mercer's pointed out, because of the topography. I don't see why we want to stop them. It seems to me in this particular time, when we want to be encouraging people who are young, but perhaps young, but I don't know, but want to go ahead and do a business, and it won't be one person employed there, of course, it'll be several people employed, and if she does expand, it'll be even more people employed, that actually already has a clientele. So it's not like somebody who's moving into a business and are they going to get anybody to come or not. I guess the young people or the older people who want to come and ride there are absolutely desperate to get back to ride there. So I propose that we accept and agree with and grant this application.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder for that?
I would be happy to second it.
Happy to second. Happy to second.
Have we? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Have we got a
Chair,
second?
can I come back on any points at all?
Yes,
Or is-
After it's been proposed.
No.
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 After it's been proposed and seconded, it becomes a debate. Only members may speak then. It's been seconded now.
I can't hear. Has it been seconded or not?
Councillor Mercer
Yes,
seconded it, so we move to a vote, I think.
Sorry, it's proposed and seconded. So sorry, there is no comeback now. Decided that. So we need to go to a vote, and the way we've decided to go to a vote, unless it's obvious that there is one way it's going to go, in which case we could do a yay or a nay, I think we've got to go round each person individually and get an individual vote from them. Okay, Charlie, can you call the names out?
Yes, Chairman. So Councillor Dudley Hughes, obviously your
Grant.
Councillor Bert Jackson.
Bert?
Councillor Jackson.
Can you do a
I
thumb?
think he's had problems with his sound.
I'm just checking. I can't see that he's still.
Can you text him, chat him, Jill?
If Councillor Jackson can hear, perhaps he could write on the chat.
Or Grant, please thumbs up.
I'm not sure that he's on here anymore.
May have left the meeting.
Okay. Councillor Barbara Jenny?
Abstain.
Councillor Lance Jones?
Against.
Councillor Andy Mercer?
For Grant.
Councillor Jill Mercer?
For Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Harriet Pentland? You still with us, Harriet?
Harriet, can you give us an answer?
You're on mute, Harriet.
Harriet has said yes, Grant.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is that it?
No, Councillor Jeff Shacklock?
No, I said I'm not taking part in this.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, you did. Councillor Alex Smith?
For Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Philip Stern? Councillor Peter Thomas?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Robin Underwood?
For Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Watson?
Grant.
Thank you. And last on the list is Councillor Lee Wilkes.
Grant.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Thomas?
Against.
Thank you. I can hear it playing in the background. I think someone's got one of their devices on, if that could be muted.
Turn devices off. So what's the answer there, Charlie? How many against and for?
8 for, 1, 2 against and 1 abstention.
Right. And Ros, do you as officers need a description of why members have agreed to promote it rather than against the officer's advice?
Thank you, Chair. I think the reasons were clearly put forward by members, so they should be sufficient for the minutes. Thank you.
Well, then I declare that that is accepted as an application. And we move to the next one, which is on page 17.
Chairman, before we move off, do we need some sort of resolution on conditions? Since we...
Well, I guess we'll leave the conditions to the officers, won't we? We don't really know what they would be.
Normally, we have the conditions come back to yourself and the vice chair and the board member for discussion.
We approve the conditions. Okay, cool. Ross, can you do that? Can you, the conditions, Ross?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would be happy to bring a list of
agreement to that
conditions for agreement. Yes. Yeah.
As I presented it, I'm quite happy to be involved in that.
Okay, you'll be the board member then for that. Thank you. So the second one on page 17, Brook Farm Cottage, Brooks Road, Rawdons. Patrick, you there? Patrick's going to take us through this one. Are you going to do them both separately?
Yes, I will. I'll do them both
seem to
separately.
have a lot of background noise still.
Can I ask everyone who can make sure their microphone is turned off until they need to speak again, just in case. But if it is those who are outside and are residents, then maybe, as you were asked to do, is cover up the phone so we don't hear all the cooking noises that you're making. So, Patrick.
Yes. Okay. Hopefully you'll see the presentation in front of you now. Can I just check that you can?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yes. We
Okay.
can.
Right. This is application. Excuse me, just so I can move through the slides. Application reference 19/01630/OUT. It's an application for 5 dwellings. It's an outline application with all matters reserved. It relates to a site at land adjacent Brook Farm Cottage off Brooks Road, Raunds. The officer's recommendation to members is that the application be granted subject to conditions as set out in the report. The slide in front of you now should be the location plan, or an extract from the location plan, showing the application site in red with the other land within the same ownership of the applicant outlined in blue. If you can see my cursor, that's Brooks Road running sort of in a southwest northeast orientation, and this here, the road or track leading off beside the application site leads to a animal sanctuary to the sort of south, just out of shot of the location plan. I'll have a couple of aerial images of the application site and its surroundings. The first one is this one in front of us. The application site is where my cursor is here. So we have Brooks Road leading off. So Brooks Road is to the northern end of Raunds. As you can see, there's sort of sporadic development. It's not too clear from this image, but there's residential development on either side of the road. The site itself is this sort of grassed area with hedging surrounding. I'll move on to the next slide. We can see it a bit better. The application site is this area here, sort of shaped around by the track leading to the animal sanctuary and a couple of dwellings to the back here. This site's accessed via Brooks Road. We've got a row of terrace houses here. We've got a dwelling here and here, and some different types of dwellings, as you can see where my cursor is on the northern or northwestern side of Brooks Road. Again, here, beyond the two or beyond the row of terraces, there's some detached houses here. Beyond the application site itself is this area here. Again, it's a grass area, beyond which are a couple of detached houses and one out of shot further beyond. Just as an introduction to the site, there's a few photos I'll show. This one here is the application site, or part of it, taken from the track that leads to the animal sanctuary. As you can see, it's mostly grass covered, mostly open towards the centre. Towards the back or left, as we're looking, there's sort of quite tall, mature trees, and out of shot again at the front. Brooks Road is to our right as we're looking at it, with some mature hedging. This is a view of the adjacent land, so this isn't the site itself, but it's similar in nature. Again, this photo is several months old, so it appears a little different now. This was taken during the winter. Again, mostly grass covered with hedging surrounding, and that's the house closest to the sort of northeast of the site. Again, this is a further picture of sort of middle and rear of the site. So you can see the taller trees towards the back, and some of the housing immediately adjacent side. You can see it's this house here with the red roof is sort of set back from the fencing, which marks the boundary of the site. This is just one view of the frontage of the site. Brooks Road itself, particularly at the point of the application site, is occupied by some dense trees and hedging, which screens much of the application site from view. This, moving on to in terms of the actual proposal itself, as I mentioned, it's an outline application with all matters reserved. That means the only matter for determination today, and as part of this application, is the principle of development. Matters including the access itself, its location, the nature and design of the dwellings, and so on. They're not for determination, but nevertheless, we have an indicative layout which shows how 5 dwellings could be accommodated on the site. So what we have here is an extract from one of those plans. We have a new access being shown, created, where some of the hedging would make way for the access, So it'd be a shared access serving all 5 houses, which are shown to be roughly in the middle of the plot, mostly where the trees aren't located. And as you can see, the track leading to the animal sanctuary sort of loops around the site. This is another indicative site plan, perhaps a bit more detail on this one. Again, it's essentially showing the same thing as the previous slide, but shows 5 dwellings, 2 pairs of semi-detached and detached, along with each of their own garden space, and the access and how it creates or move on to Brooks Road itself. At the bottom, that is an extract from a submitted indicative elevation or street scene plan, just showing us a general indication of 2-storey houses and how they could appear. In terms of the actual consideration of the application itself, the main point or main matter for determination is the principle, as it's all in outline. As set out in the Joint Core Strategy, Raunds is a market town and is therefore on the second rung of sustainable settlements behind Rushden district. The site itself is considered to effectively be within the settlement, due to its relationship with the surrounding development, both on its southwest and west or across Brooks Road. And then as you'll recall, on Brooks Road itself, there are further dwellings to the east on the southeastern side of Brooks Road. It's so it fundamentally forms part of the settlement. So in terms of the principle itself, it's considered to be part of Raunds and acceptable in terms of providing 5 dwellings on the land. Of course, any outline application, we can still have regard to other matters which aren't directly for determination. So evidently an application for 5 dwellings will have a visual impact, and access and other considerations have to be considered. I won't go into those in detail as they're set out in the report. It's worth reiterating that sites in flood zone 1, so least likely to flood. Also, the applicant has submitted a drainage strategy, which shows how any surface water can be dealt with on the site. The access itself, part of Brooks Road has been upgraded recently, and the local highway authority are not in objection. They're content that suitable access can be achieved. In terms of visual impact, officers are content that it can be accommodated suitably, particularly as there will be much hedging retained to the front, and the site is relatively large and housing can be set back. And that will also allow us an acceptable relationship with the houses opposite and nearby. Ultimately, the officer's recommendation is the application be granted subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick. Very good. We've got 2 speakers. The first one is an objector, and it's Ian Tilbury.
Sorry, Chairman, just need to interrupt. Can Patrick unshare your presentation, please?
Right, will do, yeah.
Thank you. That's okay, you can carry on, please.
Okay, so as I just suggested, it's time for another speaker, Ian Tilbury, who's an objector. You've got 3 minutes, Ian.
Thank you, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak at this unprecedented time. First of all, I'd like to state the fact that 200 metres of tarmac at the beginning of Brook Road still deems Brooks Road in a very poor state of repair. I just wanted to get that across. And also, most of the trees have already been cut down and removed. This has already had an impact on the area. Well, also, I'm find the agricultural impact statement on the retaining trees do offer very little screening to the cottages opposite the proposed site. However, due to the elevation of the land, it's significantly higher than the cottages, allowing them to be overlooked, lacking privacy, especially in the bedrooms and loft spaces. Also, when the vehicles exit the new houses at night, cottages will have to deal with headlights shining into their homes, including bedroom windows. These matters are of great concern and feel that they should not be pushed back to permission being granted. At this moment in time, there is not enough detail for us to really know and understand the impact it will have on residents. Although this water and flood not to be an issue, there's major concerns regarding the current drainage cannot cope as Brook Road and flood.
Ian, we're losing you. Are you about done?
I'm back on. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Perfect.
Quickly then.
Okay, there's a large use of agricultural vehicles using Brooks Road and the volume of said traffic has increased. There is concerns on the width of the road with 2 new entrances on the road are forced to park on the grass first of the proposed footpath is going to be making it more dangerous for pedestrians. As you're aware, there's already parking issues for the cottages. Our concern is that Brooks Road doesn't meet the current standards of the LHA and is too narrow at the point of this development. Concerns that Brooks Road is made up of various detached, semi-detached houses, and the houses not enough heat for the area, as this is a semi-rural area. Will the road be upgraded from a gated road as in such a poor state and is currently a low priority in maintenance, which if you are eligible, you will obviously see. Parking for proposed houses, we feel that tandem parking is not...
Ian, that's your 3 minutes. Have you got much more?
No, just literally 2 seconds more, I'll be with you. For this house, the individual turnaround will be made adequate. There's no enough parking for individual houses as there will be nowhere else for no one else to park. We have been informed business got their paper. The housing is decided.
Ian, have you finished?
We do not understand how it can be decided tonight when we have been given inadequate details. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
So, Ian, your time's up now. So, can you?
Yeah, I'm done.
You're done. That's good.
Yeah,
so
done,
the next speaker on this application is Tristan Peck, who is the agent.
Can you hear me? Excuse me, hold on a moment. Excuse me, my name's Mark Cooper, and I logged in with Charlie Christmas and was told that I could object tonight as well. So I've spent hours sitting listening to the meeting. Why did Charlie log me in and say I could object? I agree very much with a lot of Ian's comments, but I was told that I'll be able to make some as well.
You're down to speak for the next application, which is the 2 dwellings.
No, on the application of the 5 dwellings, aren't I, that are going to sit opposite the terrace cottages, which, as Ian's just quite well pointed out, are going to now risk a high amount of flooding and won't be allowed to park outside their own houses because of the narrow point of ingress and egress that hasn't been thought out at all. So why was I told I could speak on that if I'm not allowed to speak on it?
Well, is that Tristan or is that Ian?
It wouldn't be Tristan because he's all for it anyway. I suppose he's after getting that animal sanctuary landlord taking money out of people so he could line his own pocket.
Jim, I think that's Mark Cooper, who's down to...
It is Mark Cooper, yes. I'm a resident of one of the terrace cottages that if the elevated development goes ahead will cause flooding to my cottage, which we're happy to show you photographic evidence of how the lane floods at the moment. I'll be overlooked. I'll have no light and I won't be able to park outside my own property. Now, I was told I'll be able to make that point about a narrow lane that doesn't have access and the stupidity of putting an access and ingress point right opposite the cottages.
I must cut you off there because you've been beyond the time limit. So, thank you for the point. Listen to what the ward member says because he may have some answers for you when he speaks. So, let's move on.
Can you hear me okay? I can hear you.
In fact, Tristan, I can hear you.
Yeah, it's Tristan, yeah. Hi. Yeah. Am I okay to start? It's been an absolute waste of time.
Tristan, are you speaking?
Oh, God. I've got this chap telling me it's a waste of time, so I haven't started yet. I will start now.
I work for Bledsoes. We represent the applicant on this outline application. In August 2016, the council's pre-application response supported the principle of development on the site for residential homes, stating that the land was within the confines of Raunds. The council today still maintain their position that the development is infill and in accordance with the neighbourhood plan and local plan. The pre-application response did state that the development would need to provide a housing mix of both small and medium-sized dwellings. The indicative layout plan shows a scheme providing 4 two-bedroom dwellings and 1 4-bedroom dwelling. The council also stated that any development would need to maintain the semi-rural character on the frontage, and the indicative scheme shows a development with the retention of trees and hedgerows. Despite the council recommendation for approval, this application has been brought before the committee to mainly deal with 3 concerns. Firstly, flooding. The site is within flood zone 1 and therefore has a low risk of flooding. Despite there being no requirement for a flood risk assessment, one was commissioned to address the concerns raised. The report suggests that there will be no adverse risk to the surrounding area, with an attenuated storage system ensuring that water will be stored on site and released to the drainage network at a greenfield runoff rate, which is no different to the current state of play. Secondly, the council state that this is infill development and therefore in accord with the neighbourhood plan which supports infill development. And thirdly, concerns have been raised regarding traffic and the condition of Brooks Road. The Highway Authority have not objected to this application, and there is sufficient space within the site for parking, and there will be no requirement to park on Brooks Road. In terms of pedestrian safety and footways, as stated within the justification statement, the applicants have no objections to a footpath being provided at the front of the site, enabling safe access to the nearby footpath on Brooks Road. Other concerns such as ecology, the animal sanctuary and other matters can be dealt with by way of planning conditions. To conclude, this outline application is a sustainable form of development, sympathetic to the surrounding area and accords with the neighbourhood and local plan. Each property complies with national space standards and also benefits from off-road parking and ample amenity space. The site has the capabilities to provide a sustainable form of construction and can provide local jobs in construction to local people during these unprecedented economic times. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Right, so we now move to the ward member, which I think is Lance, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Give us your lowdown on it.
Okay, well, rather like the agent Tristan who spoke then, for me, this appears to boil down. This application has been asked to be brought in by Raunds Town Council, and it's been brought in by one of the members for Raunds. It has been brought in for 3 reasons. One is that it doesn't comply with the neighbourhood plan, that there's a risk to flooding, and there are safety issues to do with the road. The current runoff rate from that agricultural land does cause flooding on Brooks Road. So anything that does what happens now will still cause flooding. The second issue is that the general state of repair, the Brooks Road is not a 2-car wide highway. It's a single passing point and there are no footpaths on it. And the third aspect to it is about whether it represents sort of overdevelopment so far as Raunds are concerned. So I would be grateful to hear, particularly from members, with respect to the issue of the state of the road being a factor of consideration. The Local Highways Authority haven't objected, but if you read in 7.17, they have said that this road would not be adoptable in its current state. So again, I'll wait to hear members' opinions, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Jill, who wants to speak?
Sorry, Jim. I've got a message that Peter Walton wanted to speak.
Peter?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'm going to raise another matter with regard to not just this application, but applications in Raunds in general. And if we refer to paragraph 7.3 in the officer's report, we see a word has crept in, and that's the word minimum. The core spatial strategy in table 5 outlines for Raunds a target of 1,060 houses between 2011 and 2031. We are already quite definitely over that number, and we're only at 2020. Now, I cannot accept that word minimum. Nowhere in the JCS is that word used. So I really am concerned. Not so much, it's not about this site specifically, but just the whole principle. We have this strategy as our core strategy, okay, the MPPF behind it, of course, setting targets for various places. It seems Raunds seems to be a convenient place to sort of do a little bit of a salami tactic here, there and everywhere.
Do you have anything to say on this particular application?
I'm speaking on this application because what I'm saying applies to this application. Now, Raunds seems to be, at the moment, oh, hello, we've got kindergarten going. Raunds seems to be a place where little bits of extra creep in here, there and everywhere, perhaps to make up for some of the SUs and the sustainable urban extensions in our district that seem to be lagging way behind and I'm not sure will ever appear. So yeah, I'm really concerned that Raunds is being dumped on. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Joe, anyone else?
Yes, Councillor Lee Wilkes would like to speak, and then Dudley.
Sorry, who?
Thank you, Chairman.
Then Dudley's waving his hand, so you're next, Dudley.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't disagree with anything that Councillor Watton has just said. He's hit the nail firmly on the head. And I am not surprised that there are so many objections to this application. The application is down a road that is the very definition of a narrow country road. For the most part, it's single track. It is in really poor condition. The fact that a small part, a very small part, has been patched up does not mean that it is suddenly a suitable road. And I do think that we should remember this. Whilst we are looking at an application for 5 houses here, this is for 7 houses. There are 7 houses being on this plot of land. The fact that the applicant has split it into 2, 1 for 5, and we're about to hear 1 for 2, doesn't alter the fact that it is for 7 houses. And there is not enough parking on this plot. In fact, highways themselves say there is not enough parking on this plot, and that is including tandem parking, in fact, triple parking, if we look at the 4-bedroom house. So those houses, those cars are going to park on the road. There is not enough space on the road to park. So I'm not surprised that there are so many objections. It seems to me to be a totally unsuitable application. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Dudley, you've been waving your hand. No microphone, Dudley.
Now we're here. Right, JCS, table 5 identifies that the housing requirement, not anything minimum, the housing requirement is already exceeded. So that was one reason for objection. On 7.6, we point out that the neighbourhood plan says that future residential development should be restricted to infill sites or town centre redevelopment. This is not an infill site or town centre redevelopment. And thirdly, we not only have the issue around the road, but also the issue about the parking. We absolutely said as a policy we would not accept tandem parking. We absolutely said that. But of course you can get enough cars if you line them up one behind the other. That's not providing adequate parking. adequate parking is where people, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous. So what they're going to do, as we've already heard, is park on the road among all the other cars that are parked on the road. And if you drive down that road, as I do, because when I come to E&C, when I don't come anymore, but now I come to, when I used to go to E&C, I drive down that road, you will know that you have to go on the grass quite frequently, because people have parked on the side of the road because the cottages and other houses haven't got any parking apart from on the road. This is totally unsuitable place to make an entry into these houses. It is unnecessary development. It is outside the recommended number, and it is in fact not in the neighbourhood plan. And those reasons, I think it is totally inappropriate.
Thank you, David. Jill, are there any other speakers?
Yes, Andy would like to speak.
Andy?
It's one that I've come up with before in the past. There's a street lamp shown on some of those pictures. Where does that street lamp relate to the proposed entrance onto the road? Can we be told that, please?
Patrick, do you know the answer?
Yes, Chair. Remember, this is an outline application, so the site of the access isn't for determination. And
hang on, I thought that the one thing you did determine outline is the means of access.
No, I'm afraid it's up to the applicant what they're applying for, I'm afraid. And this is an outline application with all matters reserved. So access is not for determination. You must remember that. And while I'm here, I must come back on a couple of other points. I'm afraid that there was some simply wrong assertions made. The Highway Authority aren't objecting. Also, reference was made to tandem parking. As you'll see, there's significant space on the site, and it's evident that parking can be made without the need for tandem parking. Members will also be aware that there was a recent appeal decision that the council received where the council refused an application based on tandem parking. The inspector in that case was quite clear that the council was wrong to do so. It's a matter of judgment, and the council was wrong to refuse an application based purely on as Northants County guidance refers to. It's not desirable, it's not preferred. But anyway, that's a side point. The officer's view is that would be completely incorrect and unjustified reason to think about refusing this application. The main point is there is more than sufficient space to park on the site. I'd also make the point about Brooks Road itself. The Highways aren't objecting, and having visited the site last Friday, it was definitely possible for cars to pass each other on the highway. I did it myself. I'd also point out that it was also stated that there's no footpath on Brooks Road. I'm afraid that's also incorrect. There are footpaths on Brooks Road as well.
Right down the other end, mate. I'm looking out my window at the moment. There isn't one.
So someone's talking over me here.
Somebody who lives there.
Also, while I'm here, there was another point in terms of perhaps the most fundamental point in terms of the principle and what the core strategy says. What members should understand is the numbers set in the core strategy are a requirement. That is in effect a minimum. And planning does not mean that it is not a ceiling. In fact, it has to be met. There is no justification to prevent development, especially that is within Raunds, to not allow it. And also another point, reference was made to the Raunds neighbourhood plan. As set out in the report, there is no policy in the Raunds neighbourhood plan that would prevent this development. The site is within Raunds, and there is no allocations in the document, or there's no settlement policy. So it's worth being aware of that in terms of if members were to suggest that it would conflict with the neighbour plan, they would need to consult the neighbour plan and identify what policy in there it would conflict with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick. Can you just explain one point, please? Because I understood that any outline planning application was specifically for if the site's suitable for development and to get the access points agreed.
No, it is true. It's more common. It's probably more common in terms of outline applications where you get an outline application and access is included for determination. But it does happen that you get applications for outline with all matters reserved. So the actual point of the access and details of it aren't for determination. So they're perfectly within their right, and it's a valid application to do that.
Gotcha. Dudley, you've got your hand up. No microphone, Dudley.
Turning it off. I'm being good and turning it off. One reason for not accepting this application is that it does not provide adequate information about the access, because it's ridiculous to have something when we agree to it and then what happens is we don't know what the access is going to be. And I would have thought one reason for not accepting this application, apart from the fact that it does say in the residential plan, in the neighbourhood plan, future residential should be restricted to infill sites and so on. Despite all that, I think actually to have a plan without a crucial road where it's very narrow and all the rest of it, without an access plan is absolutely not acceptable.
Thank you, Dudley. Jill, are there any other speakers?
Yes, there are, me.
Lee? Come on then.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Jill. I understand what the officers are trying to explain here, but it's just not correct. The statement that there is no requirement for tandem parking on this site is not what is shown on the plan. Now, I accept the officer's statement that there is ample space on the site for parking. Of course there is. If they only build one house on it, then it leaves a ton of space for parking. But we can only determine it based on the plans that are shown to us. And it clearly shows on plot 3 that is a 4-bedroom house, there is not enough parking space for it. It needs tandem. In fact, it needs triple parking, I would suggest, to get 3 cars on there. So if there was enough space, I would imagine that the applicant had shown the parking. So there was no need for tandem or triple parking. And on the subject of footpaths, the officer is right. There are some footpaths, but the footpaths do not extend down and beyond this development. There just aren't footpaths there. I know you've driven down it and had a look. I drive down this daily. They just don't exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Any other speakers before we go to Lance for a proposal?
Well, Ros had said about clarifying, but I think that may have been done by now.
Yeah. So we're done.
No, it hasn't. Ros still needs to clarify and Patrick still needs to clarify. They've just put their messages on.
Sorry, there were so many wanting to, keep coming back in.
I don't know who was saying that. Ros, do you want to?
Yeah, it's Ros. Yes, may I clarify a couple of points? And then if Paddy, if you'd like to come in after me, if there's anything that you wish to say that I don't cover. First of all, Councillor Hughes, you were concerned that there was a lack of detail regarding access. I just want to make it absolutely clear, it is perfectly legitimate for this application to withhold access. It, as clearly stated in the report, it is an outline application with all matters reserved. That is perfectly acceptable. The second point I wanted to come back on, Councillor Wilkes, you referred to concerns about tandem parking. I want to make it very clear that the plans submitted are indicative only. So we are not looking at the size of the dwellings that are shown on the plans. It could be a completely different mix. We are just looking at the number. So they could be much smaller. There could be a completely different arrangement in terms of parking. If we can see that conceivably you could have an acceptable parking layout, then we cannot refuse because it is unreasonable to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Ros. We've been down that road already, have we not? So, are we done with the debate? Therefore,
Patrick needs to come back in.
Yeah, I'm not going to add much to what Ros just said. Only that, in my view, I think there has been too much focus on the plan itself. It's not for determination. And also, I'd only reiterate, if this was to be refused on tandem parking grounds, to my mind, that would be unreasonable, and the council would be looking at a very highly possible costs hit if that were the case. So that's the level of position I think that tandem parking plays in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Chairman, Peter Watson was waving his hand, but I don't know if that meant he was
He wants to leave the room. Yeah.
Okay, no, he's all right.
Lance, over to you, please.
Thanks very much indeed, Chairman. I think we've heard an answer with respect to parking. I think we've heard an answer with respect to infill. I think we've heard an answer with respect to excessive development. Patrick, when this case first came, was highlighted to me, I did ask you to check with the local highways authority to establish whether they felt that this development, clearly family housing, would be appropriate to allow children to walk along that road whilst 2 cars were passing and cyclists were using that road. I've never had an answer to that request. And fundamentally, I cannot hand on heart, as the ward member, recommend a development that I honestly believe will harm children and put them at risk, and this development will. So, Patrick, if you could address that before I make a proposal.
Patrick, tell us.
Yes, just briefly. I'm a little confused. So I emailed yourself last week because I had a response from Highways on that, and it's in the update sheet as well, where I asked the Highways officer to clarify their position on this, and that's where they confirmed that they do not object, and I raised the very point you raised. So that's really the answer. Really, that's one to come back on. Thank you.
Lance, back to you.
Chairman, could I just come in for a minute? The officer just said that there was something in the update sheet about a reply from Highways. All I've seen is that about the parking and whether that was sufficient, and the fact that it has undergone some resurfacing recently. I haven't seen any assurance from the Highways that they're actually happy with the this development. Is that, could he clarify?
Patrick?
Yes, sorry. In terms of, they weren't asked necessarily about the parking. Obviously, parking isn't really a direct material, well, it is a consideration, but it's not for determination here. They were asked about if they accept the access to this site. So their response, again, isn't in objection. So we've had their initial response where the same details are submitted. We've had the comments and concern raised by Councillor Jones. So I've then gone back to them and they've reiterated their position. So, you know, without them, it's not for a Highways officer to say that they would be happy every time a bike went down there. You know, they comment if they accept the access arrangements, and that's essentially the position we've got here.
Peter, you're waving your hand again?
Yes, please, because I'm a little confused with that comment from Patrick and from Highways, because nobody knows where the access is. So how can Highways have made a comment about access?
If I may, Chair, the access, of course, is going to use Brooks Road. The precise location of Brooks Road into the application site itself isn't for determination, but the Highways officer will determine it as to, is it reasonably possible that a suitable access can be gained off Brooks Road into that site. Of course, we have an indicative site now, so they've assessed it. They've assessed is Brooks Road an acceptable means to get to the site. So that's essentially how all outline applications where access isn't for determination, you know, whether it's 5 houses as we have here, or whether it's for 500 houses, that's the position that Highways authorities have to make their judgment on.
Thank you, Patrick. Lee, were you wanting to speak again? No?
Chairman, Andy wished to speak.
Thank you. I originally provoked a question about access because, as far as I can see, it isn't essential that this site has an access onto Brook Road. It could have an access through its rear end onto the lane that goes round to the animal sanctuary. So it's not a given that it has to have an access directly onto Brooks Road. So it is necessary for someone to make an assumption about which road the access is on.
Chairman, if I could just, sorry, but Andy's point there, the access road to the animal sanctuary isn't in the site marked on our plan. So I don't think that's correct.
Nor is Brooks Road.
Let's go back to Lance. Lance, summarise everything and give us a proposal, please.
Sure, thanks very much indeed, Chairman. So, like I said previously, I think we've heard about tandem parking, we've heard about the infill, we've heard about excessive development. I don't believe that my concerns were addressed by the answers given by either Patrick or the local highways authority, and in all good conscience I cannot look forward to families living on these sites and sending their children to school walking along that dreadful road, Brooks Road. And so therefore, Chairman, I must recommend that recommend refusal in this particular case.
And I'm happy to second that.
Can I have a seconder, please?
You can indeed, Chairman.
Chairman, there was...
Please second again. And the reasoning you've just given, as far as planning...
Yes, for safety purposes, it is not safe for pedestrians to move from this site into the town of Florence. Children's.
Let's do a vote again now. I think this ought to be individual. Charlie, if you're there, please.
Chairman, Ros wanted to come in and advise the members on something.
She can't do that until
before
vote now.
Before we vote. She had said it before the seconding.
Sorry, say it again, Jill.
Ros wanted to advise members before we vote.
Okay, Ros.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I just wanted to be absolutely clear that we have consulted the local highway authority, and what they're considering is whether in principle an access which is suitable could serve this site. Clearly we're not looking at the finer details of visibility and access widths, etc., but they have considered whether in principle a suitable access could serve this site. Not only have they come back initially, but we've clarified and they've provided comments on both sets of applications, so it's clearly been thoroughly looked at, and the local highway authority is not objecting. If you refuse this application and we go into an appeal situation, I don't believe we have any strong evidence in which to defend the appeal, and I think we'd be at risk of a cost award against the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I understand.
Can I ask a question?
We've done enough debate now. Lance, let's get something absolutely straight. You are refusing the case.
I am refusing it. I do not believe the local highways authority have been and understand that site. And as I repeatedly said, in all good conscience, I cannot recommend granting this. And if members think otherwise, I'm happy for my proposal to refuse to be voted down.
Did you second that? I didn't hear it first time round.
Yeah, for all the reasons that Councillor Jones has just stated, and as I know this site well, I am absolutely happy to second that proposal.
So we have a proposal and a seconder for refusing the application, and we have voting, please. Charlie?
Yes. So if I go in alphabetical order, if you could tell me, Councillor Dudley Hughes.
Microphone, please, Dudley.
Microphone, Dudley.
Yeah, I keep turning it off like a good boy. Refuse.
You are a good boy.
Councillor Bert Jackson, did you come back? I will just check.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Councillor Barbara Jenny.
Refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Mercer.
Andy.
Sorry. Say again.
I said abstain.
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Abstain. Gotcha.
Councillor Jill Mercer.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Harriet Pentland.
Object.
Councillor Jeff Shacklock.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Smith.
Refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Thomas.
Refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Robin Underwood.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Wathen.
Refuse.
And Councillor Lee Wilkes, we already have your vote. If you could just bear with me. 1, 2, 3. I have 8 for the motion, so 8 wanting to refuse the application.
Yeah.
And 1, 2, 4 abstentions.
Chairman, Vanessa would like to speak.
Yes, Vanessa, you want to speak to you, please.
Yes, if I just may reiterate the cost warning point, it is a really serious point. I do not believe that this application would, if it comes to appeal, the council will lose and it will face significant, I suspect, cost. I just needed to make you fully aware of that, and I think we need to precisely record the reasons for refusal so that when we get to appeal, we really know what we're dealing with. It's really important. So can we make sure we have a precise and detailed reasons for refusal?
Got you, Vanessa. Can you start us off, Lance? Reasons for refusal.
Yeah, Vanessa, it's really simple. Brooks Road is not a road which is designed to take two-way traffic. It doesn't have pedestrians for, it doesn't have pathways for pedestrians to use, and wouldn't be suitable for what is family housing to allow families to access by foot or by bicycle.
Yeah, understand. That's one. Just the objection term.
That's it.
Dudley, you got an objection?
Yes, it exceeds the housing requirement of 1,060 dwellings for Raunds, one thing. And secondly, the policy, the neighbourhood plan does say in the text, in the visions, future residential development should be restricted to infill sites or town centre redevelopment. This is
It is infill.
Thank you. Then Peter.
Not infill.
It is infill.
Peter, you had an objection.
Well, Dudley's actually said it that Raunds has exceeded its requirement up until 2000. Sorry, let me finish, please. And we've exceeded our requirement till 2031.
You've already said that, Peter.
I've already said it, and I've just said it again.
That's crazy. So, Vanessa, you've heard what our objections are. Do you not think they're strong enough?
No, I'm afraid I don't think they're strong enough. You have debated in full the highway safety issues, but we need full reasons other than the pathway is not wide for pedestrians. I'm afraid that isn't going to stand up at appeal. So
Vanessa, there is no, I'm sorry, Vanessa, there is no pathway. There is no path. This is virtually a broken road. The road is holed, it is pitted. It is as the local highway authority have said in their response, it is a road they would now not adopt. It is in such poor condition. So, you know, that for me provides example enough that this road is not suitable for building housing developments to spring from.
Okay, Chair, I'm going to, if I may, I'm going to suggest that we take a short adjournment and we sort these reasons out.
No. No.
No.
We could do, but I don't know if we're going to get any clearer, are we? I think the reasons are clear in the members' minds.
There are 3 reasons.
They've reiterated them.
Yeah.
If you think they're not strong enough, and you've told us that, and we stand a chance of losing an appeal, if that's the case, then members have understood that and heard that.
Okay.
So if that's what we still want to do, then probably we ought to stick with it.
As you wish.
Okay. So we've had a vote, and the vote is that we refuse the application. By 8-4, whatever it was. So we move on to the second application.
Chairman, it's Paul Bland. I need to intervene here. I'm sorry to say this, but there does need to be a reason or reasons for the refusal. So what you might choose to do is to, I notice Councillor Hughes is gesticulating that he would like to come in, but what you might like to do is just delegate the reasons to officers with the relevant members.
You have 3 reasons.
Are you members? Are you happy with that alternative?
To delegate the exact wording of the reasons.
Chairman,
your movement.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to work with anyone for the reasons for rejection. I'd rather not do it now, but
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
So, Paul, thank you very much for that suggestion. That we have made our point quite clear, but the actual end result will be ordered by officers, and we will be involved in it. The exact reasoning behind the refusal.
Yes, that's right. And if I could further say that what we need to do before proceeding to the vote is to have discussed the reasons if it's a move to refuse. So if there's on a further item, if there's any move to refuse, what we need to do is discuss the reasons before the vote is taken.
On the second application?
On any further application that there might be a move to refuse. Okay,
okay.
Thanks.
Gotcha. So that's that one sorted. Let's move on to the second one, which is on page 33. And we're getting to 10 to 9. We're not going to get this finished by 9. So can I have someone to move that we carry on beyond 9 o'clock?
I'm dying here.
Dudley and Lee seconding it. So we'll carry on from 9 o'clock.
Can we specify a time, please, Chairman, given that each application tends to be taking about an hour?
How many hours?
It's from 100. I think we ought to have a time.
Not how many they are, it's the length of time that we're taking over it. Let's just move on and get through it, and we'll work at that later on. So the next application is at the same site next door, I guess. Patrick, can you tell us about this second site?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just load up the presentation.
We don't go into a lot of detail because presumably it's the same as the previous one.
It is, yes. I won't go into to too many details, obviously, because it is similar, but of course I'll give it its due so that everyone is aware. So I'm skipping through to the application. Okay. Again, just procedurally, I'll read out the reference number for anyone listening. It is 19/01633/OUT. It is an outline application with all matters reserved for 2 dwellings. It is at land adjacent Brook Farm Cottage off Brooks Road in Vaughan. The officer's recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions.
Fine.
The site.
Sorry, Peter, have you finished, Patrick?
So do you want me to carry on?
Sorry, you've got some more to say, Patrick?
Yes. I won't be long, but there's a little bit. I'll introduce the site and so on, because we have a different site plan and so on. So it's important members see this particular application proposal. Okay, so what we're talking about here is the land outlined in red. Again, adjacent site we've just been talking about, but of course here we have a slightly different context. It's adjacent housing on the east, with the access to the animal sanctuary to the west. Again, I'll skip over the aerial photographs as we should be familiar with where we are now. We're talking about this area of land rather than where we were talking about here previously. This is the access to or leading to the animal sanctuary. So as we look at it, the site is just out of shot on the left. Again, this is further up the track with the application site on the left-hand side. This is a view of the application site itself, again taken during the winter, so we can see 2 of the houses beyond, and that there is a detached garage of the adjacent property. Again, a further site of showing the site. This is the two indicative plans provided for this application. Again, same as before, we have an illustrative access shown towards the middle of the site that they would share. So we're seeing two houses here, similar in footprint, each with a large garden set back from the highway, shown with a garage. And again, here we have clearly plenty of space for vehicles to turn and park, shown on both of these. Just in terms of context of the surroundings, the picture at the top is the immediately adjacent property, just to the northeast of the site. To the bottom, what we have here on the left is actually the access into the animal sanctuary. That's the frontage of the adjacent site, so the site itself is slightly out of shot. So, and we're seeing Brooks Road just there. This is a view facing the other way. So the animal sanctuary is here. So the previous site is on our right-hand side. And as we look at it, the site is behind the hedging on the right, roughly where my cursor is beyond the animal sanctuary. So as the indicative shows, an access will be created roughly off here into the site. This is an image of the recently tarmacked part of Brooks Road. This photo was taken last week. This is part, you can see there's a footpath here. So this isn't immediately near the site, but it is on Brooks Road. It gives you an indication, at least it is a photograph rather, of an indication of how wide this part of Brooks Road is. Again, I won't go over this too long, but fundamentally the matters are the same as previously. So the only real consideration for determination is the principle, which officers find to be acceptable for the reasons set out in the report, and all other technical matters are also found to be acceptable as far as the need for determining this application goes. So the officer's recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick.
I'll just unshare that.
Lance.
Yes, Chairman.
There he is. So back to you again, please. Give us a lowdown on this one.
Chairman,
Fairly straightforward.
Chairman, we have public speakers.
Yes.
I do apologise. Right. Mark Cooper was the next speaker, who is an objector. Got 3 minutes, Mark. Mark?
Stop dead.
Have we got Mark Cooper there? No? No? Nobody says he's there or not. So let's go on to the other speaker for the moment as he crops up afterwards.
Chairman, Mr. Cooper, he was due to speak on this item, but he was the gentleman who interjected and wished to speak on the previous item instead. It now looks like he's left the meeting.
I can't hear all of that. Is Mark Cooper not there?
Chairman, Mark Cooper has left the meeting.
Left the meeting. Okay. Well, let's go on to Tristan Peck again, who is the agent again.
Hi. So yes, I have to be the applicant on this particular application as well. So as per my previous statement, really, the council were positive with a pre-app in 2016. The principle of residential development was accepted, but it was within the confines of Raunds. The council still maintain their position today, but it's infill development and accords with the neighbourhood plan and local plan. The pre-app response did say that it was for a mixture of housing, which we've shown across both sites. We have looked to retain the rural frontage as per the pre-app. Flooding, as per my previous comments, it's greenfield runoff. This is infill development in accords with the neighbourhood plan and local plan. In terms of traffic and the condition of Brooks Road, the Highway Authority have not objected to this outline application. You did mention in the previous application about the lamp post. That was reviewed with the planning officer, and the access has been shown to be able to adhere to the fact that the lamppost would remain. The footpaths issue, we did touch on that during the course of this process. We agreed with the officer that we would be able to provide a footpath to the front of the site, which would connect to the footpath to the other side of the road, which I'm on the council website at the moment, looking at the definitive map, and it does show a footpath that runs along Brooks Road. It switches from one side to the other and continues all the way up to the frontage of the first application. I'd also like to make the point that there was an application for a couple of houses a couple of years. I'm not sure on the precise date, but I mean there's been the residential development allowed on the site further up the road with absolutely no ability to connect to a footpath, and they, for me, look like a family home. And yeah, just to conclude, I mean, this is a sustainable form of development. We've taken into account the highway comment, the council comments. It complies with national space standards, off-road parking. It's ample site, both sites, for parking. It's within the site. There's no need to park on Brooks Road. It's a sustainable form of development, providing local jobs to local people in these unprecedented economic times, which you spoke about in your when we first started this process earlier on tonight. So yeah, I'm slightly disappointed by how the first application went, but anyway, that's me done.
Thank you, Tristan. So now we've had the two speakers. Can Lance, you come back and...
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of brevity, does anyone else have anything to add further to the points that were made on the previous application?
Peter and Lee had both indicated they wanted to speak.
Do you want to comment on this, or does it ride on the previous application?
I've got further comments on this particular one, Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I will add the one thing about the JCS housing requirement. I know that was mentioned before, but I mention again.
Please don't waste our time.
I noticed that the plot here has the word Hawkswood House written on it. Can we clarify that this is not the site of Hawkswood House? Because I know Hawkswood House is a relatively new, rather splendid house along Brooks Road.
Yeah.
Can we just clarify that, please? And the second point, the agent mentioned that they met the officer and agreed that the access does not need the lamppost to be moved. Does that mean that the access is fixed? Thank you, Chairman.
No reply.
The answers.
No.
Chairman, I think I don't know whether Councillor Wilkes wishes to speak now.
Yeah, yes, please, Chairman. I'll keep it very brief. I would just like to clarify that whilst I appreciate the officer's photo of a resurfaced road with a footpath next to it, I would consider it to be fairly irrelevant when it's not actually adjacent to the site. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I make a comment, Chairman, on this application? From the plan, we see the two sites and the other access to the sanctuary, which means 3 accesses off that road. I'm really quite surprised that the Highways Agency haven't commented on that, since they won't even let one house have 2 accesses. 3 right next to each other does seem strange that they would allow that.
Right.
Sorry, and Dudley wishes to speak, and Peter.
Thank you. I think, Peter, you've got your hand up again. As long as you're sensible.
Okay, I am going to be perfectly sensible, Chairman. I think Phil Mercer makes a very good point there that didn't occur to me. Within a very short space of time, we're going to have 3 access points within the space of what, 100, 150 yards, possibly. I hadn't thought about that. We don't know exactly where well, we're told we don't know where the access points are for the two sites, but we do know where the one for the animal sanctuary is. So we'll be rather close together.
Thank you. Dudley, did you want to speak again?
Oh, sorry.
Very briefly, the comments about we have more than enough houses in Rawns. We've exceeded our target figure in fact, the target for 2030 is exceeded. And secondly, the fact the neighbourhood plan did say that there should not be houses outside the immediate vicinity of the town centre.
Thank you, Dudley. Lance, a proposal, please.
Well, I propose to reject the recommendation for this planning application, and it is on the same grounds as before. I think, and this is perhaps a lesson for the agent here, that if this was a more thought through proposal where you'd shown how the road is used, the pathway works and the accesses are, it would be easier to see this as a safe proposal. But I'm afraid on the basis that I cannot see it as safe, I actually see it as unsafe. I don't see the local highways authority having addressed particularly these issues on pedestrian safety. Then I must recommend rejection. Again, that's my proposal.
The basis, same as the last proposal, that we leave the actual wording of the refusals to the officers and the ward members.
I agree, that would be a good idea.
Like we did before. So, can I have a seconder for that, please?
Chairman,
Yes,
the planner would like to come in before you go to any votes.
Who wants to come in?
Yeah, I do, Phil. Yes. I've best if we just keep an eye on the chat, because I think some people asking to speak are sort of being missed along the way. There's one point I wanted to point out. Now, we've referred to footpaths during the discussion. Condition 18 of the recommendation has suggested that a footway across the frontage of the site be included. That's partly because then that can allow across to the footpath on the other side of the road. It appeared to be from the discussion that members weren't aware that the proposal included the possibility of a footpath at the front of the site. Councillor Wilkes referred to the photo of the recently tarmacked site and the footpath beside it, and had concerns that that's obviously not immediately adjacent to the site. Of course, what we have in front of us now is an application for houses with a footpath right beside them on that side of the housing, which then allows to cross over there. So just for clarification on those points, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick.
So if I just may, it's Mark Cooper. I was cut off previously, but I'll comment on it, how far along proceedings you are now.
Chairman.
Sorry, we did try to get you, but we have made a proposal and we have got a seconder for it, so debate should stop now and we can't include any more.
Sorry about that.
I don't think we've formally had a seconder, Chairman.
Say it again, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I don't think we had a formal seconder. Lance made the proposal. We haven't seconded it.
And I seconded it.
You seconded it, didn't you, Lee?
I did indeed, Chairman. Yes.
Okay.
So
just on that footpath one, it doesn't show a footpath on the.
The map wasn't clearer for us, but that's
the two houses.
So we have that. So we ought to go now to a vote for the proposal to refuse, like the last one. So Charlie, can we have the voting roll again, please?
Yes, I'll call your names out once again. So if I can start with Councillor Dudley Hughes, please. Are you for the motion of refusal? You're on mute, Dudley.
I'm always on bloody mute.
Hey, well, I'm a good boy. See, I'm supposed to be. Refuse.
Thank you. I'll read his name out again, but I do believe Bert Jackson has left the meeting, just to clarify. Bert Jackson? Okay. Barbara Jenny?
Refuse.
Thank you. Lance, we've got yours. Councillor Andy Mercer?
Sorry.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Mercer.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Harriet
Thanks.
Pentland.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Shacklock.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Smith.
Refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Thomas.
Refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Robin Underwood.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Wathen.
Refuse.
And Lee Wilkes, just to confirm.
Refuse.
Thank you. Let me just top those up 1 second.
Sounds like
Chairman, Paul Bland was just checking about the reasons. Were they going to be worked out with members and officers? We'd agreed that before, hadn't we?
Yes. Yes, that's part of the proposal.
Yes.
Both proposals.
So that's 7 voting to refuse the application and 5 abstentions.
Right, okay, so that motion is carried. Thank you. Let's crack on a bit longer. So we now move away from Brooks Road and we look at page 48, which is the land rear of High Street in Twywell. So the officer here, I think, is Patrick again, isn't it?
It is, Chair.
Lead us in there, please.
Right. Let me just put up the presentation. Right. Oh, excuse me 1 moment. I'm going to have to zoom through. Okay. Right. Again, procedurally, because I'm conscious this is a virtual meeting, so we'll have people dialing in and watching, including members of the public. This is application 19/01901/FUL. It is a proposal for the demolition of existing stable and store buildings and the construction of 3 new dwellings and associated landscaping work. Resubmission of previous application 19/0119/FUL. The site is land rear of 57 High Street in Twywell. The officer's recommendation is that the application be approved subject to the conditions set out in the committee report. What we have in front of us now is an extract from the location plan with the application site outlined in red, roughly an L-shaped site identifying the site and adjacent housing. Up here we have the L-shaped timber stable building towards the rear of the site. What we have in front of us now is an extract from the adopted Rural North, Oundle and Thlapston plan and the associated inset map for Twywell. This map, it's a snippet from the map, of course, for the site. Just for clarification, to make it clear for everyone watching, the red line is the settlement boundary, adopted settlement boundary for Twywell. As we can see, it's sort of in 2 distinct parts here. The site is, hopefully you can all see, it's where my cursor is. So that there is the stable building. And the site sort of wraps around in its S-shaped footprint to where it joins the high street here. So as we can see, the site is essentially all in the red line. It's also worth being aware that the blue line marks out the conservation area for Twywell. Obviously, it's not joined up here, but essentially the conservation area wraps around much of the village of Twywell, including the whole of the application site. The site itself, I've just got a few photos to show to get you familiar with some of it. This is taken facing towards the high street. So we have is it the Woodlands or Woodland Cottage here, a sort of relatively narrow detached property. The one to its right as we look is 57 High Street. As you can see, it's much lower with its ridge level, and there's no first floor windows in its rear. Closer here we have a detached sort of block garage. That house is on the other side of the road across the High Street. The access is just as far left as on the site as we look at it. So the site access will come into the site as we're looking at it, and sort of sweep around to the right and behind. Here we have the timber stable building, and that there is the adjacent site. So the boundary of the site is marked by this blockwork wall and then timber fencing beyond. And here where my cursor is post and rail fencing for the back of the site. As you can see, it's mostly grass covered at this point. This here, we're a bit closer towards the High Street, closer to the garage building here. Here we've got the adjacent property to the west, and it's the side elevation, as you can see, and you get a bit of sense of the sort of different styles in the sort of immediate locality in Toywell. Top photo, we have property called the Shrublands. So the access is essentially partly where the tarmac can be seen. So that's the adjacent property there. Again, this is a similar picture as we've previously seen with the garage, which is associated with the 57 and the woodlands just here. Again, a couple more photos from the High Street itself. So this is the access. We've got a wall obviously here which marks either side. Here looking up the access towards, and then to enter into the site where the proposed housing would be, you turn left, essentially just behind where the garage can be seen. The garage is proposed to be removed, and I'll move on to those details subsequently. A couple more photos. Again, the rear of woodland and the rear of 57 gives you a sense of the sort of the nature of the back and how the change in land levels as well. Aerially here, just the bearings, that's the stable block here. So the site is where I'm showing the cursor here. High Street, sort of snaking around through Toywell. Access taken off, you can just about make it there. A slightly more clearer image here of the stable building, the existing access that would be used to access the site here. So we get, excuse me, that's the back, sort of where the site settlement boundary is marked on the R0. Okay, and this is an extract from the proposed site plan. As I mentioned before, this is a full application, so all the details are for determination. The development itself is 3 dwellings. So what we have here at the back is 2 dwellings. So essentially they're semi-detached, but in a sort of U-shaped footprint, and then a detached dwelling just here. Existing access would be utilised and widened. So you can make out here, these are parking spaces. So each dwelling has its own parking spaces off the highway. The garage shown that we've seen on previous photos is to be removed. It's also worth reiterating that garage was related to number 57. It doesn't appear to be any great active use, but the agent has also indicated that 2 spaces could also be accommodated for number 57, essentially increasing the parking availability for number 57. In terms of the dwellings themselves, these are the elevations for the 2 houses to the rear. The front elevation we have in the top left, as you can see, that it's a slightly varied roof form shown. So we have the front elevation here. So we just have the front entrance door as we look at it, and then the other one is in the west elevation. 2 stories, utilising roof lights and sort of half dormer windows and so on. This is the 3rd plot shown, so the detached one. The front elevation facing the high street is in the top left-hand corner. So it's a relatively flat elevation, save for the sort of, I forget its name, just above the door. And then this is the side elevation on the top right beside the access road. So no ground floor windows, just a couple of first floor windows there. And that's beside the other side. And this is the rear elevation in the bottom left-hand corner. Just briefly, these are the floor plans for house 3, just give you an indication of what the rooms that the various windows would serve are. Just turning to the consideration of the application, the principal officers considered the provision of 3 houses acceptable. The site is shown to be within the adopted plan. It's related well to the nearby development. There's in terms of the pattern of development within Twywell and immediate surroundings, you'll be aware there's effectively a cul-de-sac just to the northwest of the site, which this wouldn't be completely dissimilar to. And in terms of the character, we've also had the comments from the council's conservation officer, and the scheme has been worked with the applicant and with the council's conservation officer to seek to achieve a suitable arrangement. This had previously been a 4-dwelling proposal, and now we're reached a 3-dwelling proposal, which we find to be acceptable and relates well to the surroundings. Access, again, in terms of the highway authority, they don't object and are content with the proposals. There's sufficient off-street parking, and the access, again, has been shown to be suitable. The application has provided sufficient details in terms of visibility and the works proposed, and in residential amenity, that's been another key consideration in terms of the relationships with the nearby properties fronting the high street in particular. And in terms of distances and relationships, those are found to be acceptable for the reasons set out in the reports before you. And ultimately, the recommendation is that the application be granted subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we've got 3 speakers on this. The first one is Paul Wren. Are you there, Paul?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
And he's an objector. So you've got 3 minutes, Paul.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk about 2 issues relating to this application, namely inadequate parking provision for 57 High Street and public safety on the High Street in front of 57 High Street. The previous owners of 57 High Street for 25 years possessed 2 vehicles and parked them off-road at the rear of 57 High Street. Since then, the recent tenants of 57 High Street possess 3 vehicles and also parked them off-road at the rear of the property. The planning officer's comments at paragraph 7.20 of this report says that it may be possible for occupants of 57 High Street to park within the proposed development site, but there is no further mention of this important matter in the planning officer's conditions. 57 High Street is a 3-bed detached property, and current planning guidance for these properties of this size is that 2 parking spaces plus the visitor space be available. Therefore, the absence of parking space proposals for this property is unacceptable. I also suspect that the possible parking within the proposed development site, whatever this means, will quickly be used by the proposed new properties, as it will likely be a communal parking space and not physically within the High Street property boundary. That's 57 High Street property boundary. So the likely upshot of all this is there will be more vehicles associated with 57 High Street actually parking in front of the house on the High Street. Until recently, I was a member of the Twywell Parish Council, and road safety and parking on the High Street are an ongoing problem, as the High Street is already congested. This planning proposal means that the likelihood of vehicles parking in front of 57 High Street becomes very real and will constrict what is already a narrowing of the road as it approaches a blind bend on the southbound downhill part of the road. Therefore, vehicles and cyclists coming downhill on this part of the road will be forced out onto the opposite side of the road, very close to the blind bend with very real danger of head-on collision. I commissioned my own traffic survey, which reveals 400 vehicles travelling through the high street daily at an average speed of 29 miles per hour, which further reinforces the danger aspect. I note that the planning officer has stated that travel speeds are likely to be low, which clearly isn't the case. Moving on now to the visibility display issues for vehicles entering and leaving the proposed developments. The usual requirement of a 2-metre visibility display from the back of the highway boundary has been ignored by the planning officer, and a reduced display of 1 metre accepted instead. This decision fails to take account of the traffic flows and travel speeds that I just mentioned. As far as I know, the local highway authority haven't conducted any traffic surveys themselves to help them arrive at their view that a 1 metre visibility display can be agreed to. On top of this, the likely increased number of vehicles parking in front of 57 High Street will be very close to the entrance to the proposed new development, and therefore worsen the visibility display issues at stake here, particularly regarding the speed of traffic coming southbound down the village hill,
3 minutes.
and therefore emphasises the need for extension of those 2
Paul, have you
metre.
got much more to say? Because your 3 minutes are up.
One sentence. In conclusion, the planning application before you fails to provide: point 1, adequate parking for 57 High Street; point 2, adequate visibility display. These two factors unacceptably increase the danger of road traffic collision in the High Street.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The second speaker is Councillor Tim Green of Twywell Parish Council. Are you there, Tim?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the Twywell Parish Council and the residents of Twywell. I would like to note that the parish of Twywell are actually broadly in favour of development at this site. However, after reviewing the officer's report, there are 3 significant points which we feel have not been addressed to the satisfaction of the local residents, of which 2 of these points are related to safety. These points are as follows. Point 1 relates to parking to the existing property at 57 High Street on which the land is being developed. Cars associated with 57 High Street have always parked off the highway on the land to the rear of the property, as there's nowhere safe on the highway on which to park. The High Street is only 4.6 metres in width, and if cars park outside number 57, it would impact on the safe access and egress of vehicles to the adjacent properties. It would also impact on vehicles exiting and entering the proposed development too. Due to the safety implications, we would request that the applicant's statement under 7.2 of the officer's report, where the agent states off-street parking could be provided for the occupants of number 57, is implemented within the design of this application prior to approval, as no current plan allows for such parking. Point 2 relates to highways. In the officer's report, it is noted that the local highway authorities do not object to the application and note that visibility from the access onto the High Street is acceptable when using a 1 metre wide value. This contradicts the manual for streets, which is used for highway-related matters. In paragraph 7.7, it states that a minimum of Y figure of 2 metres may be considered in some very likely traffic and slow speed situations. But using this value will mean that the front of some vehicles will protrude slightly into the running carriageway of a major arm. This said, the High Street in Twywell is a narrow carriageway of 4.6 metres, which is less than the 5.5 minimum width to allow two-way traffic for all vehicles to pass, which is stated in the manual for streets. It is clear that the manual for streets states the minimum offset distance Y is 2 metres. It does not reduce this critical figure to 1 metre as suggested by the highway officer. In Twywell Parish Council's opinion, this point needs to be revisited so the Y value is more appropriate to the surroundings. The current access design is not satisfactory and is below the standards required by policy. In its current format, does not meet the requirements of Northamptonshire County Council's policy DM9 or the manual for streets, which is therefore to the detriment of highway safety in Twywell. Our final point, which relates to the adjacent land owned by the developer, we note that the officer's statement addresses the management of the land, within the blue line. However, the prevention of future development on this land has not been addressed. We could request that this land, I've nearly finished, this land remains in perpetuity to prevent further development if further development was applied for on this area, as this would add further impact to the concerns raised around the access to site. We have no further comments.
Thank you very much. The third speaker is Justin France, who is the agent.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you.
I'm the agent representing the small independent housing developer Blenheim Homes. This site has been subject to a formal pre-application which recommended 4 dwellings on site, and then a subsequent planning application from which the comments and opinions of the consultees and local residents have been used to inform the current design. This new proposal has been designed to take on board the previous concerns and has achieved this by reducing the number of units from 4 to 3, changing the design of the units and amending the parking provision on site. The proposed properties are located to the rear of number 57 and have been designed to follow the built form of the surrounding area. An example of this can be seen in the nearby Homestead development, which features dwellings located to the rear of the properties fronting the High Street. As such, the proposed properties can be seen to fit in with the existing character of the conservation area. The units have been designed to suit the local vernacular, and the choice of materials can be seen within the existing built fabric of the village. An example of this can be found in the officer's report, where they highlight that the stone facade and stone coins proposed on house number 3 can be seen on numbers 57 and number 7 High Street. Comments were raised during the application relating to separation distances, specifically between number 57 and the proposed house number 3. There is 23 metres between the rear elevation of number 57 and the front elevation of number 3, which meets the council's requirements. Whilst number 3 in its garden is set lower than number 3, there are no first floor windows to number 57, and the proposed boundary treatment will prevent any overlooking of number 57. The proposal has been received positively by the local authority, with the council's conservation officer supporting the scheme. It should be noted that there are no tree protection orders on or adjacent to the site, and that proposed works are acceptable to the tree officer. Existing access serving number 57 and Woodlands Cottage is proposed to be adapted, and this proposal has been accepted by Northamptonshire Highways. The proposed development of the site will also remove the existing equestrian use on site, which will improve highway safety. Based on this approach, the application is now recommended for approval by the local authority, and we hope that the committee follows this advice and will find in favour of the application and help support a local independent developer. Finally, during the period of waiting for the committee date, we've issued the local authority with an amended site plan in response to concerns raised by the parish and councillor Sylvia Hughes. This new plan provides 2 dedicated parking spaces to number 57 at the rear of number 57, and as a result, the site will now provide 13 parking spaces in total, 11 spaces for the new dwellings and 2 dedicated spaces for number 57. We hope that this addition will...
Time is well up.
Yeah, that's it. We hope that this new addition will receive positively. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Justin. So those are the three speakers.
Chairman, before we go into the debate, etc., the time is now 9:30. A few of the members were thinking that it probably wouldn't be a good idea to carry on with any of the other applications after this point. We normally extend for half an hour. And
10 o'clock.
Well, at whatever time we decide to end, we would need to tell the other members of the public that we're not going to deal with their applications.
Yes. Well, we only have 3 applications to come. Okay, that could take hours, but it shouldn't do. I think if we just crack on, it's not the best thing to do.
Yes.
Well, we're all online. So, Dudley, let's continue with this application. Give us the lowdown.
Right, for a change, I'm going to be moderately brief. First of all, I welcome the comments from the developer that 2 dedicated, and I mean dedicated means the other people can't use them, parking places for number 57. So that should be a condition, I think. So it's absolutely in tablets of black and white that that's the case. Secondly, I note in A6.4, the highways recommend the offset and the visibility display sizes, and I would hope that they would take account of those and do as the highway recommends to those. I don't know how that affects the stone wall that's there, but perhaps we can hear some more about that. I do note that it does say in 7.2 that we should not exceed the capacity of local infrastructure and services And I think local infrastructure in Twywell is parking, because there aren't many services. So it is very important that we do address these parking issues and make sure that we don't exacerbate what is already a difficult situation.
So, right, thank you, Dudley. Do we have, Jill, do we have any other speakers on this?
I haven't seen anyone else wanting to speak.
No.
No. Oh, sorry, Lee Wilkes has just said he would like to speak on it.
Lee, then.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification. Can the officers confirm that if 2 of the parking spaces are dedicated to number 57, there are still sufficient parking spaces on the site for the proposed properties, please?
Yes, would you like me to come in on that, Phil? Essentially, yes. We have an application for 3 houses with 11 spaces shown currently. The agent has suggested that 2 of those could be dedicated to number 57 High Street. I see no reason why that couldn't be conditioned, that 2 of those spaces be applied to number 57. And yes, ultimately that still allows for sufficient parking spaces for each of the other dwellings. It's actually a pretty well stocked, as it were, development in terms of number of spaces for the number of houses.
Thank you. Peter, do you want another go?
Peter Wathen wished to speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just again for clarification, the point's been made about the visibility display. I notice in condition 6, which refers to the access, and I presume the visibility display, therefore it talks to proposed site plan reference P1. Not sure what that involves. Also, any waste collection point would have to be towards the highway. Would that impinge on the visibility display? It certainly seems at the moment that the visibility display is minimal, to say the least. Could we perhaps recommend that that be improved to meet the County Council's manual of streets? Thank you.
Patrick, are you ready to answer that one?
I can do. In terms of the waste collection, it shouldn't. Well, no, it wouldn't impinge on the actual visibility. That the proposed location for the waste collection is set away from the highway and the pavement itself, so it wouldn't be on the pavement and it wouldn't be blocking motorists' visibility onto the highway. Sorry, I can't recall the second part of your question.
It really was about the size of the display. That comment was made by the couple of the speakers. Would it be better if it were enlarged?
Well, I guess ultimately the position is that it's found by the Highway Authority to be acceptable. Whether or not it would be appropriate or necessary to require greater visibility, and realistically how would that be achieved? I'm not quite sure if that means a further part of the wall being removed or by whatever means that would be achieved, really. So just in terms of the practicalities of what that would mean for say a condition, I'm not sure if perhaps you may have an idea that the access be widened or what. In theory, that could be conditioned, but it's hard to say precisely depending on what we're talking about.
Dudley, can we go back?
If I could just come back, Chairman. I mean, if we have some sort of standard set by the County Council, surely this should meet that standard. It has been a point raised by the local people, and I notice at 6.4 Highways comments says comments including that visibility displays are required. It doesn't go into any detail.
Okay, Dudley.
Chairman, Lee would like to come back.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just so I can get it clear in my mind, Patrick, on this site, we are saying that there will be 2 visitor parking spaces for 4 properties, 3 on the development and number 57. Is that correct? And if it is correct, is that acceptable?
No, somebody else.
So excuse me, I'm just trying to find the part of the report where the parking is listed. Excuse me. But anyway, ultimately, yes, it is acceptable. There are developments where we have we permit houses which have either the 2 or 3 spaces, depending on whether they're over 4 bedrooms or not, provided, and visitors. It's not uncommon for on small developments visitor spaces to not be included. This one includes visitor spaces, in addition to obviously the required separate parking spaces for the houses. This proposal uses 2 of those visitor spaces, or this late suggestion, as it were, is that 2 of those visitor spaces would be allocated to number 57, if that answers my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dudley.
Is I understand there are 11 parking places for the residents of these new houses, and there are 2 parking places that are actually designated, not available, but designated only for the use of number 57. And I think that's very important. That should be a condition on the application, that there can be no doubt that 2 places are always available for number 57. Because I parked outside number 57 today, and the road is very narrow there because the bend is just before the splay, and it really is dangerous. So I think that's more or less what the speaker said, but I just want to make sure that's in a condition so there can't be any doubt about it. And as to the splay and the actual access, it seems to me, I know the stone wall is there, but it's not a wonderful stone wall. Really, it does need to be improved because the bend is just before this access. People come down that bend quite quickly because before that it's fairly a bit open road. And I think that it's very important that people trying to get out of that property should have a proper visibility. So I would like it also conditioned that the splay and the access are widened. Apart from that, I'd be happy to. So with those 2 conditions, I'd be happy in a moment, if nobody else is going to speak, to propose that we accept this application.
Chairman, Ros wished to speak about the visibility.
I'm going to bring Ros into it because I'm not sure that we can actually meet those conditions.
Chairman, if I may, I just had a few comments about the proposed visibility display condition. First of all, I just wanted to draw your attention to the relevant comments from the Highway Authority on that point. I'll just read it out.
Substandard.
I'm looking here at 6.4 of the committee report. Whilst the visibility to the west is substandard in terms of the requirements of 2 metres by 43 metres for an access onto a carriageway with a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, we would give due weight to the fact that the access will be improved over the existing form in terms of gradient and pedestrian visibility, and in this instance would suggest that the access junction visibility is sufficient as the high street is straight and visibility improves dramatically using an offset of 1 metre rather than 2 metres, an exercise the local highway authority has carried out, demonstrating edging out of a vehicle. So I just wanted you to be clear on that advice. I do have a concern that if you do impose a condition, I'm not convinced at this point that the applicant could necessarily meet that. We're not sure what changes they would need to make and whether they could comply with that. And we shouldn't impose a condition if it cannot be complied with. I also don't think, based on what the Highway Authority has said, I don't think it's necessary, and therefore it's also not reasonable to apply such a condition. Thank you.
Well, can I come back? So the highway is straight going down the hill. I can assure you the highway is not straight going up the hill because there's a bend just before this access, because I sat there this afternoon. So actually, people coming down the hill, I would concede, although actually it's very difficult to see because of all the cars parked, but they would be going fairly slowly because there's so many cars on the road. People coming up the hill could be going quite quickly because there aren't any houses beyond that. And therefore, that's really the concern. If you were easing out of that road, people coming up the hill could be coming quite quickly, and you wouldn't really be able to see them very well. So that's my concern. I mean, I know all the issues about it, but I do think this needs investigating. This is obviously a concern of the people who live in the village, who have been very nice and said they're happy about the idea of development and so on. They're not being difficult about it, but they are worried that number 57 plus these new houses plus Wood Cottage are all going to be coming out of that access, and they all need to be able to see what's coming up and down the hill, and particularly what's coming up the hill. So somehow, I'm not quite sure how, but somehow we need to ensure that that splay and access are safe, because for us to pass it and then to be a terrible accident there when we haven't ensured that that's safe, I think would be a mistake. Otherwise, I think it's you know, the people are happy, and the actual stone effect and so on is quite nice, but that's the problem.
Dudley, you've had advice from Ros that the splay is acceptable to highways, and therefore they decide that that is the case and we can't really go against it. So the splay is acceptable in their opinion, and we have to accept that.
They also say it's substandard, Chairman.
Well, the only thing, perhaps, a way around this is to defer it and us to try and negotiate with highways if they can improve it.
Or whether we can negotiate with the developer if they can improve it, because if they're happy to improve the access, then it wouldn't be a problem, would it?
If that's what you want to do.
Well, I think so, because I do think this is there were only two issues that the parish council had commented about. One was the parking. We fulfilled that one. We're delighted about that. And secondly was this visibility thing. And I think coming up the hill, particularly, people coming around that corner, it's quite difficult to see out. I do think we should perhaps defer it until there's been some sort of negotiation with the developer about improving the display.
Ros, what do you reckon about deferring it and seeing if we can do a little bit better, particularly with display?
Well, as I've pointed out, the Highway Authority is satisfied based on the application as submitted. However, members, obviously it is your decision, and if you felt that it was necessary to defer in order to ascertain whether visibility display improvements could be made, that is an option open to you. Personally, I think it's unreasonable because we've got the advice from the Highway Authority that the application is acceptable in its current form.
Gotcha.
But they also say it's substandard, and they've probably never been there. You done a dust survey. For them to say the road is straight, the road's not straight coming up the hill. It's straight going down the hill, but not going down around the corner.
Your advice here, quite plain, saying it's acceptable.
Sorry, I believe that Patrick knows some more about the access. Could we ask him?
Yeah, I was only going to briefly say I'm conscious that there's discussion about deferring it to look into the visibility of the access itself. I'm just conscious that this access arrangement has been reached following sort of previous discussions, negotiations back and forth, and further Holly's initials comments, and then amendments already. So it's probably best that members are aware that this access arrangement has been reached following sort of changes to the initial plan as it stands already. So I couldn't be confident that a deferral would necessarily be fruitful in terms of getting any adjustment to the access we have before.
I can assure you nothing's changed about the access. The access is as it is, and there's not been any negotiation about looking at
it's because the access. So you know the office has told us that. That's straightforward. So we've got to make up our own minds whether you trust highways or not.
I propose that we defer this until the access issue is resolved satisfactorily, in conjunction with Parish Council.
So that's a proposal.
Yep.
Do we have a seconder?
You do indeed, Chairman.
Yeah.
Right. Then we better go to a vote on it. Charlie?
Yes, hello.
Would you like to do a count?
I will. Okay.
It's a deferral.
Yep.
to try
just for the sake of it, I know he's not probably here, but just in case he's popped back, Councillor Jackson? No. Councillor Barbara Jenny?
Are you for a deferral, Barbara?
Are you with us, Barbara?
I reckon she must have gone.
I think I went to sleep. No, I'm for the proposal. For deferment.
Well done, Barbara.
Councillor Lance Jones?
For the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Mercer?
For the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Mercer?
For the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Harriet Pentland?
For the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Shacklock?
For the deferral.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alex Smith?
For the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Thomas?
For the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Robin Underwood?
For the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Wathen?
For.
Yeah. And Councillor Wilkes, you are also for the deferral.
Indeed, yes.
That's unanimous then.
That's unanimous. So
Thank
that's
you.
carried. So it's a deferral to sometime in the future to allow negotiations on the display area. So that's that one. 10 to 10. So are you members happy that we carry on?
No.
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 Chair, can I formally request that we call an end to the evening and defer the remaining applications?
Absolutely right.
Councillor Smith.
Second.
With apologies to those speakers that have been waiting all this time, but no, this is the way it works. So we could close the meeting now. Is it your wish that we close the meeting now and the balance of the applications come at the next meeting?
Agreed.
Chair,
Yes.
Chair,
Agreed.
Chair, Paul Bland speaking. Just before you do close the meeting, and I think that was clear that that motion was agreed, that we defer the remaining items to the next meeting. But I just need to say, for the record and for the minutes, a heartfelt thanks to Ros Johnson. This is her last Planning Management Committee meeting. She has a new job that she'll be moving to in June, and she has been an excellent colleague, a real change maker in planning services and in the development management team, and will be greatly missed. So I hope that you'd agree with me that we give our thanks to Ros for all of the hard work, and it has been an awful lot of hard work over the last few years, with the amount of applications and the complexity of them that she's had to deal with, and wish her well in her new role.
And bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. It's been great working with you all.
I'm now to close the meeting with apologies to those that have been hanging around, but at least you haven't had to come out to listen to us. You've done it from your homes. Apologies for not finishing off the agenda, but you can see that we do debate strongly and well, and it's worth it for everyone. So without further ado, I close it. I haven't got a gavel, but I close the meeting as of now. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.